Welcome to this session on understanding state and federal law in regards to bullying and harassment, dating violence, suicide prevention, abuse reporting, and drugs and alcohol. The first section will explore, as a teacher, what are the nuts and bolts of what I need to know in regards to bullying and harassing behaviors of a student towards another student. In school settings, students will joke around, bother each other, make fun of each other, and even push or shove. So, when do these behaviors rise to the level of a legal definition of bullying? For the incident to be classified as bullying, we must first take a look at the effect that the behavior is having on the targeted student. For example, was he or she physically harmed, or was there damage to any of the student's property, or even damage to his reputation? We also have to consider whether the targeted student is fearful, or does he perceive the behaviors as playful in nature? Does he feel intimidated, threatened, or abused? To effectively answer these questions, we must view the effect from the targeted student's perspective and not the perspective of the observer. This means listening to what the targeted student says and how he acts immediately after the incident or over a period of time. For example, does the targeted student withdraw, become aggressive, cry a lot, seem distracted, or stop coming to school? If we find the incident or incidents have a significant effect on the targeted student, this student's rights of coming to school and learning in a safe environment have been violated. It is also important to remember that bullying can be an accumulation of a series of events, or it can be a single incident that is significant enough to affect the student feeling safe at school. Also, in the legal definition of bullying, remember that there is always some type of power of the bully over the targeted student, whether it be physical power or social power. And this power can be real or it can be perceived by the targeted student. Previously, disciplinary action for bullying could only occur when the incident happened on campus, on a school vehicle or bus, or at a school-related or school-sponsored activity. In the 85th legislative session, David's Law was passed and clarification was given when a school administrator may investigate or assign a disciplinary action for an electronic bullying or cyberbullying incident that occurred off campus. With the new law, teachers can refer a student for cyberbullying off campus under two conditions. The first condition is when the effects of the cyberbullying disrupts the classroom operation. Notice the key word is substantial. This means that if cyberbullying is brought up in class, but the students and learning can be redirected, the classroom operation has not been substantially disrupted. However, for example, if a verbal or physical fight breaks out due to an off-campus cyberbullying incident, this can be considered a substantial disruption. The second condition can occur when the target student cannot benefit from his or her educational opportunities due to the effect from the cyberbullying, such as fearful of being hurt or being excluded to the degree that he does not want to participate, doesn't want to go into the halls or the locker rooms, or even come to school. David's Law has further stated that a student can be referred for a DAEP placement or expelled if the student responsible for the on- or off-campus cyberbullying encourages suicide, incites violence through any group bullying, or releases or threatens to release intimate visual material of a minor or an adult student without consent. While bullying is a state definition, harassment is a federal definition, and harassment of students is protected under the Office of Civil Rights. Bullying moves into harassment when the bullying behavior is based on one or more of the factors on the slide, whether it be because of a student's race, religion, disability, gender, and other factors. When harassment occurs based on one of these areas and it is ignored in the school setting, that lays the grounds for a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights. So, what is my role as the teacher? The first thing is always to provide a classroom that is safe and free of any behavior that is disrespectful or hurtful to other students. Never tolerate one student making another student feel uncomfortable or unsafe while in your classroom or throughout the building. Also, prevent unkind behavior in your classroom by teaching, practicing, modeling, and encouraging the behaviors that you expect from all the students. When a student comes to you saying that they have been bullied, never ignore that report. Under the Texas Education Code, if a staff member is made aware of an incident or witnesses a bullying or harassing incident, a report must be made and an investigation must be completed in 10 school days. The law further states that a teacher or campus may be held accountable for what they should have known. An example might be when hazing, bullying, or harassment occurs in an unsupervised locker room in a secondary school. Teachers and coaches should know that these types of behaviors are more likely to occur when there is no supervision. When a student comes to you, ensure they know where their forms are kept and where they can turn them in. Under David's law, each school and district must provide a process for anonymous reporting. If the student is too young or too upset to fill out the report, help the student fill it out. And lastly, when any inappropriate behavior, physical or verbal, is observed from one student to another, always intervene and let the students know that unkind or unsafe behavior is not tolerated. Also remember that hazing, making student hit list, or any form of retaliation must be reported to the office and stopped immediately. In studies across the United States, one of the most unreported incidents that happen in schools are dating violence. We're going to take a quick look at dating violence in the schools and what our role as teachers might be. Dating violence under the law can be between same-sex couples as well as opposite-sex couples. It can happen between couples that are in a dating relationship, or it can happen between students who are married. There are always some type of abuse, whether it be social, emotional, or sexual, and this abuse usually starts off slow. It's repeated, it's purposeful, and there is a definite imbalance of power. And remember, dating violence is always about power and control. Many students who are involved in dating relationships that are unhealthy may have witnessed this with their parents or older siblings. Some students, this may be their first dating experience, and at first, instead of feeling like they're being controlled, it may feel like they're being loved. There are short-term and sometimes long-term and devastating consequences for both the abuser and the victim. It is important to pay attention to couples on your campus when the relationships do appear to be unhappy or one seems to be controlling over the other. Some of the long-term effects can be severe and long-lasting and lead to depression, grades dropping, substance abuse, eating problems, and even suicidal thinking or completion. Many students stay in an abusive dating or married relationship because the victim doesn't believe someone else will love him or her, or they think they don't deserve better. Teachers in the building see students every day in their classrooms and in the hallways. Teachers probably know students in the building better than any staff member. So it's important for teachers to pay attention to those students who they know are married or in a dating relationship and how they treat each other. When an observation is made between a couple that indicate there's some early signs of moving toward a controlling or violent relationship, consult with a school counselor and see how he or she may help. When witnessing an event between a married or dating couple in the school building that is abusive, that is controlling, immediately report this to the building administrator. All staff members need to make sure that all of our students are safe in our buildings at all times. As the numbers are increasing across our country and in our school of students who are not only thinking about suicide, but are attempting or completing suicide, as well as seeing younger and younger students being involved in suicidal ideation, it is important for staff members in all buildings to recognize the signs and symptoms of students who might be depressed enough to consider this as an alternative. Students who we see that may be having suicidal ideation are usually very seriously depressed, and we see things like sleeping problems, eating problems, withdrawing, hopelessness, very low mood, low energy, and we might also see an increase or a beginning of alcohol and drug usage or abuse. Sometimes we see students who are very impulsive or they are taking risk in their social life. Oftentimes we see kids who openly talk about suicide or expressing a strong wish to die. The most concern that we have with students that might be thinking about suicide is when they start giving away some of their most loved possessions or thinking of and developing a plan of how they may kill themselves. There are some students who are at higher risk for attempting suicide than others. We certainly want to pay attention to those students who are actively and verbally talking about suicide or threatening suicide. For those students who have a plan, whether they're going to use a knife, gun, or pills, and even more importantly, those that have access to those weapons. We want to pay attention to students' drawings, writings about death, dying, and suicide. And certainly students who have attempted suicide before, and even serious enough to have been hospitalized, or if they have a family member who has completed suicide or has attempted suicide, these students are more at risk, as are those students who have recently experienced a severe loss, trouble, or a major change in his or her life. So when a student comes to you and talks to you or shares with you their thoughts about hurting themselves, what can you do? There's three major things that a teacher or anyone can do, and that's to show you care, ask about suicide, and then seek help for that student. As teachers, we must take all talk of suicide seriously. And the way we show we care about those students is to listen carefully to what they say, repeat back to them or in a summary what you've heard them say, and don't worry about doing or saying exactly the right thing. Your interest in that student is what is important to that student. Always remember to be genuine. Don't be afraid to tell the student that you're concerned about them, that you want them to feel better, and certainly that you don't want them to hurt themselves. Talking with a student about suicidal thinking can be difficult, but don't be afraid to ask questions by being direct, but don't be confrontational. Many people think that if they raise the subject of suicide, it will put an idea in a student's head. But research has shown this is not the case. They've probably already been thinking about it, and you're just seeing some of the signs. Be sure that you check with a student to see that they're getting help or some kind of treatment. For example, have they talked to their parent, someone in their church, their synagogue, or another trusted family member or neighbor or adult? Have they seen a doctor, or have they seen an outside counselor or the school counselor? As a teacher, when a student comes to you talking about suicide, there are 3 things to remember that are absolutely important. Take that student to the school counselor that day. Never leave the student alone. We never know how serious a student is considering suicide, and we want to be sure that we take all preventative measures to ensure that it does not happen. And then again, remember that this information is confidential. The campus administrator and or the counselor will notify any teachers or staff members who have a need to know about that student once an investigation has been completed and a determination of where that student is has been made. Our next to the last section that we are covering today in looking at the nuts and bolts of the requirements of legal and state laws is to look at the reporting of child abuse. As a reminder, there are 4 types of child abuse to watch for: neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. A parent's responsibility is to provide an environment for their children that helps them develop in the areas of health, nutrition, their learning, and their emotional well-being. And this happens through providing proper shelter and safe living conditions. In today's economy, this may be difficult for parents, either because one parent or both parents have lost their jobs, or because the family is living in poverty. Under the law, for neglect to be proven, a family or parents must be in the position to provide this shelter and safe living conditions. For example, we all know that children do better when they have plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables on a daily basis, but some families may not be able to provide that because of their socioeconomic status. About 28% of all abuse reports a year are through physical abuse. These are injuries not caused from an accident, but are intentional injuries that cause bruises, fractures, welts, burns, scars, and even some injuries that we're not able to see because they're covered up by clothes or even internal. These injuries are caused intentionally to hurt a child through either beatings, shakings, burning, biting, or other forms of physical abuse. About 8% of all annual abuse reports have to do with emotional abuse. Perhaps the low percentages in this area have to do with how difficult it is for neighbors or teachers to be able to know what's going on with the child within their home. In order for children to survive, let alone thrive, they need to live in an environment where they're not demeaned, ridiculed, threatened, intimidated, locked up in closets. This is what emotional abuse looks like and sounds like. Because we are not in a child's home, we do not know what goes on. However, looking at children who give us signs of withdrawal or cries a lot, or it may even be aggressive and call others names, these may be kids who might live in an environment that is unsafe. If you suspect that a child is not doing well because of how they're treated in the home, you need to see your school counselor. About 30% of all child abuse cases that are referred annually are sexual abuse cases. Very seldom does child abuse occur through a stranger. Child abuse is mostly committed by a family member, a family friend, a coach, or a friend or a neighbor. Children are usually threatened that if they tell, either they will be hurt or someone in their family will be hurt. They are also made to feel like it is their fault, and if they tell, their parents will be very disappointed in them and blame the child. It often takes years for a child to, or a teenager for that matter, to gain courage enough to report this sexual abuse. So when you see in a child's drawing or in their writings, or they come to you and report sexual abuse, it is critically important that you take all reports or suspicions of sexual abuse seriously. Texas law is quite clear about the reporting of child abuse. Any person who thinks or suspects a child may be abused, neglected, or exploited, they must make a report to Child Protective Services within 48 hours. If a student comes to a teacher and directly tells the teacher that he or she is being abused or neglected, that teacher must be the one who makes the report to CPS. If the report is made in good faith, there is no civil or criminal liability. But remember, anyone who does not make a report of suspected abuse, they can be held liable for a misdemeanor or a felony. As a teacher, and being concerned about our students possibly being abused, pay attention to your students. Be observant. Listen to them. Watch their drawings, their writings, what they say, what they wear. And remember to always report any suspected abuse. Teachers do not need to have facts. They just need suspicion. And always remember, keep the information about the student and the family confidential. The last section today is to look at the nuts and bolts about potential drug and alcohol abuse in our schools by our students. Although the signs that we'll talk about on this slide may not indicate that a student is using drugs or alcohol, these are signs that can be associated with that use and abuse. So pay attention when students show little interest, particularly in their grooming. Maybe their grades are dropping, they're stopping coming to school or coming late, they appear tired or sleep through your classes, or maybe they're abnormally aggressive, angry, or agitated. And the other thing that we see with these type of students is their relationships begin to break down with their family, their friends, and their teachers. There are many physical signs that we see for students who are using and abusing drugs and alcohol. Certainly that red, glassy look in their eye, runny noses, nosebleeds, frequent sore throats. If we see bruises or needle marks or long sleeves being worn in hot weather, or even we see severe dental problems, tooth decay, and even weight loss are all important signs to pay attention to. And as always, as a teacher, be observant. Contact the school nurse if you suspect one of your students is under the influence of drugs and alcohol and may need medical attention. Also, contact the campus administrator if you suspect a student is under the influence while at school, or may have drugs or alcohol on them or any paraphernalia that is prohibited to have on the campus. And as always, keep the information confidential. As always, remember what teachers do the best. Teach students it's okay to ask for help, give them permission to talk about trauma, help them identify trusted adults, encourage students to participate in school and community activities, acknowledge any student efforts, be a good listener as often as you can. Because remember, having a safe and respectful campus may simply be a matter of a caring person being available, knowing what to do at the right place at the right time.